Welcome to our next episode of Muse Stories, Return on Investment Tales from the Arts. I'm your host, Tracy Durson, and I'm so excited to have my next guest on this episode, Mishari, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself in just a moment, but welcome. Thank you for being here. So let's jump in. Tell us who you are, a little fun fact about yourself, and anything you want to share about your background.
My name's Mishari. I'm a field publicist in Chicago, working in TV and film. I know, fun fact is the first musical I ever saw was Wicked. And then I got to work on both Wicked for Good and Wicked Part One on the publicity side here in Chicago. So it was really a full kind of circle moment. It was an incredible experience.
Oh my gosh, that is a total full circle moment. And who would
Yeah.
have known back when you saw it live on Broadway that you would be working on it and the film side of it, really, because nobody could have
Yeah,
predicted that.
I
That's
know.
amazing. Yeah. Let's kick this off by framing the episode a little bit. So for those people who have listened before or just tuning in for the first time, these stories are meant to really showcase and highlight where degrees in the performing arts can lead you, either within or outside of the industry. And each story is so unique. And so I'm just so excited to share your story because I think it's a really cool pathway and where you started and where you are now. So let's kick it off. Tell everybody a little bit about, what your process was researching undergraduate programs, how you landed on your major, and what your major was.
Yeah. So I got a BFA in theater management from the theater school at DePaul University. You have to say the whole thing. I started doing theater when I was in like fourth grade, and I was always behind the stage. I never was like an actor. I never wanted to do it. It was just not for me. I did stage management and it's like as much as you can when you're in like sixth grade. Then like really got into stage management and a little bit of design in high school. I loved being in charge of behind the stage and seeing how everything worked and every aspect of it. And I went to Carl Sandburg High School in Orland Park, in Illinois, and it was a really good theater program for a high school, but we also rented our theater out to the public. It was like a
Hmm.
really beautiful state of the art performance hall, and I got to work as like a theater manager in high school my sophomore through senior year, where I was like helping other organizations use our theater, and I was like, who knew this was like a part that we could do? And so my like technical director in high school helped me figure out, and he was the one who was like, theater management like might be something, because I thought I was just going to go into stage management, and he was like, look at this. So I started to look at that degree and realized there was only a few actual programs that offered BFAs in theater management. And so that's what I started to look at. I knew I wanted a BFA. I think at the time I didn't really know what it meant other than it sounded fancier. So I was like, yeah, that one. And so I like pretty much exclusively looked at theater management BFA programs. I looked a little bit at general like theater arts degrees, but those weren't exactly what I was looking for. They were still kind of performance based. And I was like, that I don't want to be on the stage. And I interviewed at a bunch of different places. I got into a bunch of different places, but I ended up at DePaul because it was in Chicago. A lot of the other schools that I were looking at were off in, college towns where that was really all they had. And one school, even I asked, like, what theater do you see outside of what you're creating? And they were like, oh, once a year we take a field trip to Chicago. And I was like, oh, what if I just lived there instead? And so I'm from the area. So when I was applying, I was like, I'm getting out. I don't want to be here. And then I was like, well, actually, Chicago's where theater is being made. There's so many theater companies. There's so many people creating just to create art in the city. And I was like, that's it. So I ended up picking DePaul. Every single person there was like an actual working member of the theater community. They're not teachers who teach, they're teachers who do. Like they were all actively in the community. And so I picked that one. I was like, why would I go somewhere that was isolated where I could instead immerse myself immediately into it?
You bring up some really interesting points in all of that. There are often a lot of programs to research, and students should research all those different programs. But
Mhm.
when you're looking at this world and want to become a professional within the performing arts, there is a lot to be said for being able to immerse yourself in activities outside of your institution if
Mhm.
possible, right? And, to your
Yeah.
point, there aren't tons of theater management programs throughout the country, so you can
Mhm.
be a little bit more discerning in where you choose to go, which I think is
Yeah.
important. I'm also curious for you to share. Some people probably don't know what a theater management degree is. So can you tell a little bit about what it is?
Theater management is running a theater company. For our program, we did classes and everything so that we could learn how to run a theater company. So I took acting, directing, script analysis, playwriting. I took design classes so that we could have the language to speak to every aspect of a theater company so that we knew how to communicate with actors, with designers, with everybody that you would need to. And then we took classes in like fundraising and marketing and writing so that we could learn how to run a theater company. And that was essentially what the program was setting you up for. DePaul specifically was also dual enrolled in the business school, which was really important to like my parents when I was like, I'm gonna major in theater. And they were like, ah. And I was like, it's 2 degrees. So we also took classes in the business school. So I was taking, not only was I taking marketing for theater taught by marketing directors at theater companies across Chicago, but I was also taking accounting and statistics and economics and marketing, but all through the business college as well. So they were giving me the like knowledge and skill set to work as a professional, but the background and experience and the hands-on of theater, of doing it specifically in theater, which I think is such a different language at times that you're like, okay, I know what this means. I know what it's like to program a season and how to come up with that and why that's different than marketing shoes, like it's different.
I really appreciate that. And I think what as people listen to these episodes, what may often come up for them is that they don't understand what goes on behind the scenes in any sort
Mhm.
of production process, right? So theater and or beyond. But it's always interesting. It's very easy to show up to a show and see, the actors and, be aware of the lights and the sound. But there are so much more that goes into putting on any sort of production. And I think it's always fascinating to hear what that looks like and what goes into it, to the point of like you're taking all different types of theater classes and business classes, and that is what puts together this really robust degree opportunity. So I'm curious, from your theater management degree and experience, what would you
Mhm.
say were some of the biggest takeaways that helps you enter into your professional chapter?
I think the fact that it showed you that there were other things, exactly that. I feel like that was what I would say the most, like trying to explain what my degree was to like other people, they were always so confused because exactly they know acting and they know crew. They get that, but then you're like, "Oh, I'm the one who's actually like inputting the names into the playbill and getting sponsors for the ads." And they're like, "Oh." And you're like, "Yeah." That has to happen. People have to, like, take that so, like, getting to actually learn that there's so many parts to a theater company that people don't think about, I think was really helpful, and I think it just teaches you to just go with it. I think theater and communications and everything is always just kind of like, "Well, I don't know, we're gonna figure it out together, like, let's go," and so I think it really taught you to kind of, like, roll with the punches and to think creatively that I think that skill set has set me apart from so many other applicants of when I'm looking at it because 'cause I'm so used to being like, "Well, I don't know. Actually, like, we don't have a budget and, like, we don't have anything, but, like, what if we did this? And what if we changed it this way? Or, like, oh, this person's sick. What do we do? It's like, well, we'll figure it out. We'll change. We'll pivot. We'll move. Cause I mean, it's so cliche, but it's like the show has to go on. We have to do this. We're gonna figure it out.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. And I think it's hard to understand how valuable that skill is until you're in a moment of like, oh my gosh, I can either figure this out or let it fall apart. And you have been trained to figure it out, which is just so valuable. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about what happened after you graduated. So you have this amazing degree, you get all of these cool
Mhm,
experiences, you
mhm.
graduated. Then what did you do?
First is that I had 4 internships while I was in undergrad. That changed my life. It changed my career, it changed my opportunities, it changed my understanding of who I was and what I wanted to do. Those were so pivotal because I was able to get a job before I graduated. because I had a resume with actual job experience, with full things. I think that my resume showed exactly what I was interested in. My first internship was at Looking Glass Theater Company in development and events. My next internship was at Second City in marketing. The next one was still at Second City, but now in the public relations because I got poached from the PR team and I just pivoted. And then my final internship was a year-long position with the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events through the city of Chicago in their public relations and media team. So all in undergrad, which is just like cuckoo bananas, I think, when I think about that. I was like, how did I do any of it? Now I'm tired. It, like the sun goes down and I'm like out. Um,
You had different
but
energy 10 years ago.
yeah, yeah, I had energy when I was like 19, you know? But that taught me how to be an adult, how to work, how to have a job and manage all of these things, but more importantly, what I wanted to do, like what I liked doing. So when I came to starting to apply at the end of the year, I ended up taking a whim and applied to be the special events and development assistant, I think was the title, at Williamstown Theater Festival
Hmm.
in Williamstown, Massachusetts. It was summer stock theater, which is something DePaul actually didn't do a lot of because of how our school year ended. So it's like a huge deal for other schools, but like something we never really got to play with. But I ended up getting that. I graduated June 12th. I was on the plane to Massachusetts June 3rd. It's still like cap and gown, like in the airport. And it was 3 months of working every single day for an entire summer. We put on 12 shows. We had two shows running at any given time where we were flipping, and I ran their development and events department. And I think that was like trial by fire. It was like, well, I said I liked doing development and I said I liked doing special events. If I could do it for 10 hours a day for 3 months straight, we'll see how that goes. And I did. I really enjoyed it. It was such an incredible summer. I mean, it was absolutely insane. I don't know how we did it, but we did. Got some great experience and great connections. And towards the end of that, started to apply because I knew I wanted to come back to Chicago. Wanted to come back to the city. I had no interest in going anywhere else. My family's here. My friends were here. So I started applying and I ended up at the Gene Siskel Film Center at the Art Institute of Chicago. And it was like an independent art house movie theater. And I did development and special events. And I planned all of their fundraisers and ran and wrote their fundraising letters. That is where I learned I liked the job function, but I had to care about what I was fundraising for. I
Mm.
had to care about the mission. I had to care about the product that we were doing. And I learned that like art house film was just like not what interested me. And I think that was really important to learn because I was like, well, I love fundraising and special events. I'll love any job. And I was like, oh, actually, it's a lot harder to like work all of these hours and do all of this work and be this tired and like, stay up and run around and do all this stuff if I like don't feel as passionate about the like creation and the content and the mission of the org. So then I started to look for new jobs and ended up at the Goodman Theater as their special events and development assistant. It had a much crazier title, but essentially that was what it was. So it's like a straight line of like exactly the same kind of things, but it was at the Goodman, a place that I had gone to for field trips when I was in like 7th grade. It was the most important thing I've ever done was getting to work there and have that experience. And I was so young. I felt like it was crazy to be there that quickly because when you're getting a degree in theater in Chicago, that's it. That's where you want to be is like the Goodman Theater. So it was such an incredible opportunity. And I did development and special events for 2 years. And then the pandemic hit. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm working in fundraising and party planning at a theater company when people can't be here. So I was like, what do we do? Goodman was incredible at keeping us and creating a space for us to be. And it just so happened the communications coordinator left and they turned to me and they were like, well, we're not planning any events. And I had helped in the communications, but like that wasn't what I was doing. They were like, do you want to start doing that? Well, we don't have any events. And I said, yes, please don't fire me. I'd love to do communications. And I loved it. I found out that it was communications what I loved doing it. It made so much sense to me. I had so much fun writing. You got to be a storyteller and I it just clicked in a way that I wasn't expecting it to click. And I had had experience in internships doing public relations, but I thought when I was doing all of this stuff, it was also events. So I was like, that's what I want to do. And then after doing events for a couple of years, I was like, maybe it's communications. Maybe it's being a storyteller and getting to tell people why this work is important and why we're doing these things. And especially during the pandemic, when you're trying to write letters of like, why is it important for you to fundraise and contribute to the arts when the world is crazy? Why is it important for you to do this? And I found it so fun and challenging to do that, that I was like, what if I got a master's degree in that? And so I applied to grad school at DePaul, get the double demon discount, and then got my master's in PR and advertising 1 month after I started my first 2 classes. I had applied for a job at a whim and got where I'm currently at, which is being a film and TV publicist at Allied Global Marketing.
Yeah, it's so crazy because, we were reflecting on this a little bit before we started recording the podcast, but you just don't ever really know where your career is going to lead you. And then all of a
No.
sudden, you were saying like, I look back 10 years and like, here I am in this position and people are coming to you to hear your story and get advice. And, you know, it just was in some ways like very intentional happenstance. You made this decision to stay in Chicago. You followed your heart in pursuing the theater management degree. And to that point
Mhm.
of having those internships, I mean, that is so invaluable. And people don't always realize that. But coming out of a university degree with this resume experience just elevates you enough when people are looking at you as candidates for jobs to think like, well, you're not a
Mhm.
fresh out of college person with no experience, just hoping to break in. Like you have this experience and you did a great job of working for performing arts institutions, but diversifying in what you're doing and the types of places
Yeah.
that you're working at, which I think is really, I know because I know you, that was very intentional and also
Yeah.
so smart because it helped set you up for possibilities after you graduated. But I
Yeah.
really love how you elevated that you got to work for Goodman. And for people who don't know what the Goodman is, if they're outside of Chicago, it's a big deal, everyone. Like it's a big deal theater, it's very well known in Chicago, so to get there that young and be able to continue on even when the world was facing, the pandemic, that's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
But what I think is even more fun is, again, like position to experience is like, oh, wait a minute, light bulb. Let me jump in and do this master's degree, right? So maybe talk about that for a minute. Like talk about how your
Well,
master's degree has helped with your current position.
yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I think it's so important to recognize I got the job before grad school. Like, I
Mm,
applied for my job at the exact same time I was buying textbooks. So I hadn't even started my master's degree. And so I interviewed and really got accepted to be in a completely different field with a completely different like industry with only my experience in theater and
mm,
my degree. And I applied and it said on my resume like expected graduation with an MA into public relations. And my interview and was really like, here's what we're trying to do. And I was like, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've never been a publicist before and I've never worked in film and television before, but like everything that you're asking or everything that you're saying, I had an example and an example and an example of relevant experience. And they were talking about how what I do now is I handle local media and word of mouth groups for major studios, and they were like, "How would you approach that?" And I was like, "Well, luckily this is my city. I've been here. I have these connections. I've been doing that because when you're working in fundraising, you have to reach out to all of these tiny organizations and different things to try to like, who would have thought me reaching out to organizations to get silent auction items for a gala would then come into play for me trying to come up with word of mouth groups for movies. Because I'm like, oh, I've done this research. I know these orgs, but I think that, comes into play. So I ended up getting my master's in public relations and advertising with like a focus in PR, because that's what I knew I wanted to stick around that one. And it was really fascinating because I, had a couple years off for undergrad before I decided to get my master's. And DePaul has a program that's like a mix of undergrads getting their master's all at once and like other people like me who were coming back or people who graduated and were like going right into it. So it was a really fun mix of students and like age groups and experiences. And so I kind of like went to grad school and was learning the like theory of what I'm doing while
mm.
actually doing it on the ground at work. So I was like double learning. I remember when I got the job, I asked my boss to be like, "Can we talk?" And she was like, "Do you want more money?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but also like I just wanted to point out like I haven't graduated. Like I am in grad school. I'm still a student. Like I'm learning and like it's really important to me that I graduate and like I'm taking night classes." And she was like, "That's great." She said, "I have the personality to do this." And she was like, "And that is important." And I was like, "Yes."
Well, it's so curious to think about that. So you were on the job learning in a degree program simultaneously. I think people don't always process how valuable that can be because it's not always the expected trajectory, right? Like a lot of people either go undergrad to graduate school or they'll go undergrad, take a pause, do graduate school, maybe do some like intern hours in it. But I'm curious to know, like, what do you think the biggest takeaway was for you in grad school to be learning while doing?
Yeah.
And do you feel like the master's degree has helped propel you forward in your work as you've continued at your same company?
I think it definitely made me a better writer. I think
Mm.
I have the personality. I can talk my way into any situation possible. And I think that came from the events and the fundraising because we that is the skill that I needed then was to be a good oral communicator and talk through and like get to talk to donors and explain why we're doing these things and how important that is. And to be able to like run an event and be in charge and communicate clearly about what our goals were, so I felt very confident in that. What I lacked confidence in was my like written skill set. I can talk through anything, but like writing it down suddenly felt really hard for me. I had to start learning. I was like, well, now every like I'm no longer face to face with these people. I'm now having to email my pitches and my communication that way. I'm like, yeah, oh. And so it was really nice to be able to be like learn what I had to do and why I needed to do it. But then in grad school, they were like, here's the fundamentals and here's the theory behind it and here's how to practice. And I was able to like write 100 sample letters that were like being graded where it was on purpose that I was being graded, where it's like, I could write something and I would get feedback on it and like, this has worked and this didn't, or here's how you need to change that, or here's how to make it more clear, which was helpful because like I can't be bothering my boss and coworkers to be like, can you proofread this or can you draft this or does it make sense? And so it kind of gave me the like confidence to be able to do the work that was being asked of me because I had the ability, I had a safer space to like learn and fail in the classroom so that I could kind of like execute it at work and just be like, yeah, I got it. Totally.
Yeah, so lower stakes in some ways, right? I'm going to ask you a hot button topic. How
Yes.
do you think AI is impacting this PR landscape?
I think it is impacting it greatly. I I don't know. I don't love it. I think that writing is such an important skill set that needs to be done every day because you will lose that skill. You'll start to forget how to write clearly. You'll come reliant on it. And it becomes kind of frustrating to like do this thing over and over and over again. I will say AI can be helpful in that like I have to keep track of RSVP lists and every single partner that I work with gives me their names in a different format. And so sometimes I just copy and paste all of those names and ask the AI to be like, can you format these in that way? Super helpful. Saves me 7 minutes and a lot of frustration. But having it write my pitches for me, I don't like doing just because I want to I paid money to be a better writer. I'm not going to like let that skill lessen. I will say it can be helpful for proofreading or copy editing if you're like, hey, I have the idea, like, can you do this if you aren't in a space to collaborate with your coworkers or peers? It could be helpful that way, but I don't like it as like a starting point because I writing is so important. That's a human skill. Like no one can be a better communicator than a person.
No, I appreciate you saying that because it is a hot button topic, right? And I'm always curious to see, especially people who are in places where your profession centers in writing. But you
Mhm.
make an extremely important point, in my opinion, that your voice will not be generated by AI. Even if you train the tool and as it continues to improve, it's still not you if you're having AI generate the original content. But I do think that there is value in using it as a tool to optimize a process of organizing a list or formatting
Mhm.
something or right or maybe even help with topic generation that then you can take on to create your content. I don't want to create a whole storm around this, but I think that there's just value for people to hear that your unique voice deserves to be heard. And I would
Mhm.
hate to see voices start to disappear because we're letting a computer generate content because it's easier and faster, but that doesn't mean that that's what we all should be consuming, right?
Yeah, and I think you can tell. I think you can tell when it is written by AI because it's colder. There's something about it that just doesn't feel as like genuine in your topic. And I'm like, I can tell. I know that you didn't write that. Like, just write it. And that comes from someone who like literally was so unconfident in her writing ability that she thought she needed to go to grad school for it. And now I'm like, no, no, just write it and then proofread it and then try again and it'll be fine.
I thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's not a topic we've talked about in other episodes before, but it's so poignant, especially again for high school students who are starting to write essays to get into college, and then people, in their degree journeys and professional pathways, like just bring you to whatever you're involved in or whatever you're working on. And I think that, it creates more robust experience and opportunities. And I think each individual person really just deserves to take up the space that they are working hard to earn in their careers and educational journey. So not to be cheesy, but I really do think it's important to bring the real you to whatever situation you're navigating.
Yes.
So no, I appreciate that for sure.
No, I think it's especially in the arts, the whole point of creation and create being an artist and like wanting to be in a field that is based in creativity is because you are trying to do something. I think people are always arguing about AI and art because it's not human, it's not genuine. So like why would you use it in this industry and in this sphere specifically? I don't know what's happening in like tech world. Maybe that makes sense, but the point of art is trying to tell a story that's yours. AI can't do that.
No, it absolutely cannot, right? An artist's story should be told from their perspective, their experience. I hope people are really listening to this because it's very important. And AI is moving so quickly that I don't think any of us will be able to identify the impact of it until we have
Way,
some
way, yeah.
hard realizations, right? And so I think it's important for us to honor and preserve our art forms and also understand how AI may impact it moving forward. Thanks for letting us go down that pathway to talk about AI. I did not prepare you for that, but I was like, oh, let's talk about this because it is relevant in this moment. So thank you. So, all right, you are now in what sounds to be a very fulfilling position in your career. You've been in your company
Mhm.
for, I think you said 4 years. I'm curious, as students are on the earlier parts of their journeys, or if there are people in other professional spaces who are now considering making a pivot over to working in some sort of arts related position, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to pursue a pathway in the creative and or performing arts spaces?
Yeah. Well, one, switching from theater into film. When I left doing theater, it was the first time in my entire life that I had not been doing theater since I was in fourth grade. Started doing theater in fourth grade, and I did it every single day, every moment of my life until I left the Goodman. And I was devastated. I was like, who am I as a person if I'm not a theater person? And I think that took a lot from me. I think that I was so scared to leave that because I didn't know who I was gonna be if I wasn't in theater, especially going to film. I was like, "Oh, no." But I think the skill sets and everything that I'd learned doing theater just it's the same. It's all the same. I think I talk about it a lot with students now who are asking, "How do you get involved in this?" And they're like, "Well, I've never done it before," or like, "How do I do this?" And I'm like, having a theater degree, having an arts degree, and any kind of creative field, you are so much more equipped to work in an office setting than you think you are because you have the ability to do the hard things. So you can take that and put it into a field that would normally not be creative or that you would think would not be creative. And you actually get to do so much with it. And I think that is so fun. I think you can kind of approach things in a way that work is allowed to be fun. And I feel like it's hard sometimes to kind of think about it that way, but you can have fun with your career if you approach it in a different way, or if you find something that you love and that you're good at, that makes it more fun for me. Like, I love what I do. It's so silly sometimes. It's so hard sometimes. But at the end of the day, I truly do love what I get to do. And I think working in theater and having to like be in rehearsals when you're in high school and you're doing all of these tests and being late and having to stay up and then you have to wake up and go to school and then you're doing it in college and it's worse because now you have a social life and rehearsal and a job and internships. So you know how to do it all when it's like difficult and stressful and hard and you don't have any money and everything is terrible. And then you eventually find actually, I love marketing. I love communication. I love getting to tell stories. And I think once you figure out what is it about your job that you love to do, you can find that in anything, which is how I think that my career kind of, went around like this. But like the common thread always, I think, was telling stories in communication. You're telling a story every single time you write a fundraising letter. You're telling a story every time you plan an event. There's a theme, there's a purpose. It has to fit and match the mission. You're communicating in development. You're individually connecting with donors and people. And now I'm doing it on a publicity side for major films and titles. And I'm doing it the same thing. I'm telling stories of like why this influencer should come see this movie, why it's important to come see it, why it's important to see it in theater, why it's important to go and do these things. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. I learned what I loved to do. I learned I was good at it and was like, as long as I think I feel connected to that, you'll be fine. And I learned that in undergrad.
I am so grateful to you for elevating that because there's two really big points that just came out of what you said. One is that try to find something that you love to do and make that your career, right? Because we are going to work many years of our lives, hopefully, and you want to find joy in going to work. Even the days that are hard, you want to be happy to be there and overall really just enjoy the work that you're doing and understand the purpose behind it e- and be able to see possibilities. So I think that's one huge part of it. The other thing that really came out of what you just said that I hope people are picking up on is the sheer amount of transferable skills that you have because of the degree and experience that you have, right? You're still in the earlier part of your professional life. And my brain went straight to picture like, where will Mishari be in 10 to 15 years from now? Nobody really knows, but you now know that you are able to jump industries and spaces
Mhm.
because you are confident in your abilities and skills of knowing how to do advancement and PR and connecting with people and understanding what your values are and what you bring to a company. And even in just what you said, you really sold like, this is me, Mishari, and this is what I can bring to your company, even if it's in something vastly different than theater and or film and television. So I think that that's a huge part of a takeaway of this conversation is that you
Mhm.
have learned so many different skills and abilities that have set you up to be a very successful professional.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what theater is, or like arts in general is just trying to communicate something, communicate a story, communicate a feeling, an emotion, a moment of whatever. And you learn that in every part of it. Actors are learning how to tell stories, lighting designers, like sound designers, set designers, they're every part of any kind of creative field is all trying to communicate something through what they're doing. And that's just what I think being a human is, but also like being in professional, almost everything that you're trying to do, as long as you're good at communicating, that I think is the most important skill set that I could have ever learned was like being able to clearly talk about things and get your point across. Because if you're working in marketing, so important. If you're working in fundraising, so important. But it's also through general management and human resources and like all of these crazy things. One of the girls that I graduated with now, she's like a manager of human resources at like a furniture company. And she's like the head of human resources. And I'm like, we have the same degree and we couldn't be further apart on like what we do. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, this is what I love about these stories and hence the return on investment tales from the arts because the return on investment is huge. And I just hope people continue to really let that sink in that, there are again so many different pathways, but so much of it starts in pursuing something that you're passionate about and dreaming about where it can take you. So thank you for being an amazing example of how that story can manifest. And I'm so excited for you and happy to have been able to have this conversation with you and hear your story and grateful that you took a little bit of time to share. So thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. So everyone listening, stay in touch with Mashari and her story. And I imagine that you'd be willing to talk to people who are interested in learning more about
Absolutely.
you and from you. And again, just so grateful. So thank you so much.
Of course.